Hey friends, welcome back to Channeling Chinez. If you are new here, my name's Chinez, and this is the platform where we look at the energy and spirituality behind many of today's modern life experiences. And if you are returning here, thank you so much for staying channeled in. And welcome to another podcast episode. In this video, we are going to be talking about everything that went wrong with the Netflix Avatar: The Last Airbender series. I'm going to be real with y'all. I don't think that there's any show that I like more in this lifetime than Avatar: The Last Airbender. There aren't enough positive things I can say about this show. And I know that there are a lot of YouTubers and essayists talking about how things went wrong in the plot and with the characters and in telling the story. But on this channel, I really want to focus on the things that went wrong from a spiritual standpoint. So there are certain particular areas where Netflix really fell short for me. And there's about 4 different sections we're going to get through in this podcast and break down exactly how they completely royally screwed this up. I know that the show, listen, I will give it the visuals. Visually stunning. The bending, super cool looking. There were a lot of really awesome moments where the bending was what you wanted it to look and feel like. But overall, the writers in this Netflix team didn't seem to truly understand Avatar from a spiritual standpoint, and we're going to get into that. But before we get into this video, please go ahead and check out this quick message. Please also be reminded that any celebrities or public figures used in the depiction of these concepts are for entertainment purposes only. Please help me in keeping everyone safe online as we use these videos to heal and build our individual and collective consciousness. The 4 areas that I think the Netflix team completely dropped the ball on are the spiritual realm, past life connection, Aang and Zuko's parallel lives, timeline convergence, and their overall take on feminine energy. One of the biggest criticisms of Legend of Korra is the way that they portrayed the spirit realm. When the writers of Legend of Korra brought in Rava and Batu, they created this energy behind spirituality that sort of painted it as a right and wrong world. And spirituality doesn't exactly exist in that world. It exists in a world that is amoral as opposed to immoral. And a lot of critics really disliked that when it came to Legend of Korra and it came to Rava and Batu, because it made it seem like dark energy was just bad and there was really no purpose for it, instead of having the deeper understanding that we know Avatar: The Last Airbender original series has when it comes to realizing that spiritual entities typically just are because they're existing as they are. So amorality is a separation from right or wrong. Things just exist. There is no attachment to any sort of accepted standard, while immorality is based in standards. And so I have the same criticism from Legend of Korra for this Netflix adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender. They completely missed the subtle undertones of the spirit realm and created some sort of a false perception of what was originally portrayed in the series. It really warped the motivations of the spirit. I'm not really sure why they chose to put Ko and the owl in this episode. I do have the understanding that they are condensing episodes and elements in order to create this narration of a live action series, but it felt really rushed and unnecessary. And they really just made Ko a villain that actually fed on other people, instead of what Ko really was just the existence of the absorption of emotional expression. One of the things that they brought in a lot of additional source material from the comics was the Mother of Faces. And there is this understanding, if you did read the comics, that Ko is the son of the Mother of Faces. And so Ko's energy just existed to absorb emotions. However, in this adaptation, Ko is just running around eating people and eating people's faces for absolutely no reason. This particular angle create Ko as an immoral spiritual figure as opposed to an amoral spiritual figure. And then we sort of just skated past Heibai. And there was a very deep spiritual lesson for the Heibai story in the original telling of Avatar: The Last Airbender. The biggest loss was that we didn't get that message across. Heibai was the energy of the forest, and we do see Aang acknowledge that for a second, but we don't get to see Aang connect within his own spirituality and being able to connect to Heibai to then show him that the forest would eventually heal. In doing so, this created healing for Heibai's energy, and then he released the village people that he was sort of holding hostage within his imbalanced energy. I think that that's really where they fell short with all of their spiritual depictions. They didn't show that these entities can simply just be imbalanced in their energetic approach, and that creating balance is typically where you're going to be able to defeat some of these spiritual entities. And then in other cases, because these spiritual entities are amoral, so they are just an energy that exists as it is, there really isn't reasoning with that energy, like in the case of Ko or like in the case of the owl. There is just sort of dealing with the energy or not dealing with the energy. However, in this world, it became a very battly versus human beings versus the spirit realm. And Avatar: The Last Airbender, at least in the original, it didn't really give off that energy. You later find out about what Avatar Kuruk had to go through within the comics and within the readings of the Kyoshi novel. And that gives us more of a sense of what it was like to create balance in the spirit realm for the Avatar outside of what we saw in Legend of Korra. But for some reason, and I'm not surprised by this, but the spiritual part of that was completely lost in this adaptation. And just an aside, that is another reason why I really dislike or have a visceral reaction anytime I see modern movies, TV shows, specials that are trying to highlight a quote unquote new age spiritual approach. I've seen some things about twin flames, and this is just like, I haven't looked into these things. I've just seen titles on certain streaming platforms about twin flames or healing one's generational curses or childhood wounds. And I think the reason why I have a visceral reaction to it is because I don't believe that spirituality is something that should or can be sold to someone. Ultimately, it's something that you seek for yourself. And the commodifying of everything, particularly in the United States, is really draining at times. And you can see just how the creators of this Netflix Avatar series chose to sort of commodify Avatar as opposed to deeply understanding why certain decisions happened in order to build that deeply spiritual element into the plot of the story and into the fabric of each character. They also chose to display the Fog of Lost Souls as a place where the evil spirit Ko sends you. And that's actually inaccurate. If you did watch The Legend of Korra, the Fog of Lost Souls is a spirit in and of itself. Again, we're looking at spirits as amoral, and the mere fact that dark memories exist is an energy that exists. So it's one of those spiritual entities that you can't really reason with. You either get lost in the Fog of Lost Souls or you do not, or you reconnect to your inner self and you can make it out, like we see Tenzin do in Legend of Korra. In the Netflix version of the Fog of Lost Souls, you're stuck there because Ko ate you. Like, it just really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Other issues that I had with the spirit realm, which, you know what, I wouldn't particularly call these issues. I would just say they were choices that I didn't particularly care for. Yue as a knowledge seeker, a knowledge fox, kind of interesting, kind of not. Are you the moon? Are you a knowledge fox? I don't know. And also having us meet Yue in this spirit realm kind of made me feel like the writers may not be doing the episode of the swamp where Aang sees Toph prior to meeting Toph. I don't know why we had to rush that element in this first season when this is something that happens in book 2, but that's also a really big theme in this Netflix adaptation, is to completely rush things. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel, liking this video, or leaving a comment, as it helps me so much in the algorithm. The next spiritual issue I found with this version of Avatar: The Last Airbender is Aang's past life connection. So they decided to take a new angle toward past life connection and make it so that Aang wouldn't be able to connect to any of the past avatars unless he was in one of their temples, which would exist on one of their homelands. I thought this really took away from the Avatar state, and I thought it was spiritually watered down because it took away from the power of meditation and the power that Aang had in connecting to his inner self through meditation. This felt like a bigger loss than I've seen other people discuss, because I think it takes away from the fact that meditation and spirituality is something that everyone can connect to and adopt into their lives. There are a lot of aspects about Avatar: The Last Airbender that I feel can open someone up to their own inner spirituality. The concept of past life regression meditation is a thing that exists. The ability to meditate, to connect to your past lives, is something that I've even tried myself, and it is such a deep, strange, interesting experience. If any of you are ever interested in hearing how that went for me, how my first past life regression meditation went and what I saw and what I experienced, let me know in the comments if you would want to hear a podcast episode or get a quick video about that. But we did see a lot of Aang's past lives. They were all surprisingly kind of mean to Aang, and I thought that that was a weird choice. But I would appreciate if Aang had the ability to connect to those past lives through his meditation. So who knows? They could decide in season 2 if I choose to entertain it, because honestly, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't see myself going back. But they could choose in season 2 to have Aang get teaching from Guru Patik that allows him to then connect with his past lives through meditation and through the Avatar state without being in their temples. But I don't have a lot of faith, because I just don't think that the writers in this case really understood the assignment in the first place. The next spiritual issue I have with this Netflix adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender is how they chose to display the parallel lives happening between Aang and Zuko. In the original Avatar: The Last Airbender, we get the episode The Blue Spirit and The Storm. The Storm actually comes before The Blue Spirit. And these episodes are super important because they give you Aang's backstory, but they also give you the backstory of how Zuko was burned and banished. And you're able to see while watching, and through the amazing subtle nuances of the original writers, how their stories are sort of mirroring each other. You have two individuals with heavy expectations, a need to define and actualize their life purpose. They both are living with a lot of uncertainty of how to approach things or who they really are, and they're existing with this soul tie between them, and it is a literal soul tie. Like many of us who love Avatar know, Zuko is the great-grandson of Avatar Roku and Sozin, which would make Aang a spiritual family member and a literal family member of Zuko. And so this soul tie between them is very real, but also the way their lives mirror each other and how their timelines eventually converge at these junctures in their journey in the episode In the Storm, where Aang is coming to terms with having left and having lost the entire Air Nation, while Zuko is coming to terms with his banishment, having been pushed out of his own community. Instead, we get this very long-winded, drawn-out, literal conversation about all of their innermost motivations, and it completely takes away from the revelation that their lives are actually parallel. That's something that you're supposed to really see visually in Aang telling his story and Iroh telling the soldiers Zuko's story, and then seeing how that motivated Zuko to free Aang from Zhao. But we don't get any of that. We just get a very basic, over-explanatory conversation about what has motivated them to get to that place. And we also already knew Aang's backstory because we were shown that. And in some instances, I enjoyed watching that and seeing that, but I'm just not sure if that change was necessary from a spiritual standpoint, because it just doesn't allow the audience to appreciate how timelines can converge and how two people and two souls can be pulled together through the destiny paths of their lives. And last but not least, the most frustrating change that they made is the way that they destroyed feminine energy, and particularly Katara's character. Avatar: The Last Airbender, the original series, has always been far above its competitors when it comes to writing feminine characters. We get to see feminines who are activated in many, if not all, of their chakra centers. This is why characters like Azula and Suki and Katara and Toph are so groundbreaking, even Ty Lee, and motivating because of their strength in their masculinity and also their precision and connection to their femininity. We completely lose all complexities in these characters, and they're reduced to their masculine chakra areas. Katara is completely reduced to focusing only on being a warrior and building skills, which is very root chakra and very solar plexus. Azula is super insecure and strictly seeks the approval of her father, and that wasn't Azula. I was very disappointed at how weak they made her solar plexus. Is Azula internally insecure? Sure, yes. Because if she's not perfect, then she doesn't have value and doesn't see value in herself. But this is something that we need to learn about her over time. To show her as this weak, fragile girl who's just in search of daddy's approval was honestly, I'm not even gonna hold y'all, very insulting. Suki is more concerned with flirting with the first boy she's seen than being a Kyoshi warrior, and that's not who Suki was. And these critiques are in no way a critique of the acting of these women, because I do think that many of the actors that they chose were great in the role. Many of them had a great look, especially Sokka, especially Aang, and Zuko. And of course, Ozai. Ozai looks just how you would expect Ozai to look. This is not an indictment on the actors themselves, but it is on the way that they've been written and what they had to work with. And I do want to spend a large part of our time talking about how they destroyed Katara's character, because she was one of the main characters that was ignited in all 7 of her chakra areas. The original Katara had no choice but to step up and be responsible after the passing of her mother and after their father left for the war. She had a very strong root chakra and a solid structure system because she had to be that. She also built relationships with her brother and her grandmother and the people in the village because she was such a central part of creating home for so many people. And that gave her a sense of innate and just natural sense of confidence. On top of that, what made Katara the most strong was the fact that she had a completely open heart space. She was never afraid to use her voice and to speak up, even when other people didn't agree with what she had to say. A lot of her intuition is what led Team Avatar through many of their challenges, and she was overall just more consciously connected to how everything that they were doing was going to impact the overall world. The Katara that we received was so embarrassing. There was no emotional depth to any female character, and particularly not of Katara, who was supposed to be the most emotional intelligent. And one of the main ways they stripped her of this emotional intelligence is by making it seem like she wasn't the one who was mothering Sokka and that she was somewhere off playing in puddles while he was trying to be a warrior. They even went as far as giving us a flashback of Katara when her mother was still alive. And I think her mother and her grandmother are like braiding something, or they're doing some sort of stereotypical feminine task. And Katara completely rejects this task, saying she was never really into that kind of stuff. And that wasn't Katara. Katara was not the rejection of feminine energy. Katara was the balance of the masculine and the feminine. The fact that she could sew up a pair of pants and she could also get you together and whip you in the face with water. That's what made her amazing. Her masculinity and femininity were never separated in the way that they chose to portray her in this Netflix film. She was truly in a queen state of mastering flow and the balance between the two. They further disconnected Katara from her heart space because there was no actual relationship building between her and Aang. There was actually very little relationship building between her and Sokka as well. They always seemed to be off doing individual tasks, and then they would bring the characters back together to say some of the most iconic lines in the show, but without any of the actual meat and potatoes, any of the actual details in the buildup of it all. And with eliminating episodes like the prison where Katara meets Haru and then breaks the people out of prison, and some of those smaller episodes, we didn't get to see her throat chakra in action. We didn't get to see any hope speeches until the very end, and it was very off and awkward, and they didn't do it right. It had no heart, it had no focus. And they also didn't properly utilize her voice in that in the original Avatar, her motivations for wanting to be trained by Master Paku was to become a master, not just so that she could be a warrior and a fighter. And they made this Katara just, it was giving very much, this is a man's point of view of why a woman wants to be strong, as opposed to allowing her to tell her own story. And again, one of the most disappointing aspects is the way that they completely dismantled her intuition. We got a little bit of it in the beginning when she said that she felt like something was special about Aang. But in the original Avatar: The Last Airbender, nobody wanted to embrace Aang but Katara. She convinced everyone, and she didn't have to have proof. Her intuition spoke for itself. And it always spoke in every situation. In the ways that she went through questioning her intuition with Jet, or trusting Zhang Zhang, or even her intuition to steal the waterbending scroll, her ability to trust herself and to master the trust in herself in order to be protecting and serving of Aang was a huge part of who she was. And they completely washed that away. Her crown chakra was all but non-existent. She briefly touched on it by showing Aang life after the forest was burned down. They actually let Katara do the acorn bit, and they gave us a little speech at the end, but that was about it. And I just have to wonder I'm saying that, and I'm already saying the answer to myself inside my head. But my question is that I just have to wonder what the need to diminish feminine energy is in writing, in cinema, and in projects that we are all consuming. And as I ask that question, I'm already answering it in that we are living in a time where the feminine has constantly been suppressed, and we are now living in a time period where we are having a resurgence. And so in order for the Netflix adaptation to ever get a single shred of my attention again, they would have to address these things. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy content like this, please consider subscribing to my channel. Please also consider giving this video a like or leaving a comment, as it helps me greatly in the algorithm. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode.